Hello students, welcome back. In the last session we have discussed common Java exceptions, then syntax of exception handling in Java. We have also discussed one program based on exception handling, then multiple catch statements to handle multiple exceptions. Then lastly we have studied the finally statement in Java. So finally statements, it is a block of statement which is executed at the end of a program. Okay, in today's session we'll continue our discussion of exceptions. So let's start. Throwing our own exceptions. We know that at the time of execution of a program, if something goes wrong, the JVM, that is Java Virtual Machine, creates an exception object and throws it. So this happens internally. JVM creates an exception object and it throws it. The programmer can only catch the exception which is thrown by the JVM and he can process it. But sometimes we may want to throw an exception based on certain conditions. We may want to throw a predefined exception, or we may want to throw our own exception, that is user defined exception. Throwing an exception in a program can be achieved by using a keyword, that is throw keyword. By using a throw keyword, we can throw an exception. So there may be times when we would like to throw our own exceptions. We can do this by using the keyword, that is throw, and the syntax of a throw keyword is throw, the operator new, and then the throwable exception or throwable subclass. That is our exception class we need to define. And when we use the syntax, that particular exception is thrown, that could be catched by a catch statement. One example is given here. You can see throw new arithmetic exception. These are all predefined exceptions and we are creating an object of arithmetic exception. You can see a new object here, a new keyword here, which creates an object of arithmetic exception, and throw keyword simply throws an exception. Then we have one more example, throw number format exception. Here also we are creating an object of number format exception and we are throwing it. One detailed example is given below. You can see we can use the try block. Inside the try block we have a condition, say if flag is less than 0. If flag is less than 0, so flag is a variable which contains some value, and if that value is less than 0, we are throwing an exception. What exception we are throwing? Throw new null pointer exception. So we want to throw a null pointer exception. Usually when flag is less than 0, the JVM will not generate any exception, or there is no such exception, but we as a programmer, we want the exception to be thrown when the flag is less than 0. In such cases we can manually throw an exception by using a throw keyword. Okay, there is one more important keyword which can be used, and that keyword is throws keyword. So there are two keywords, throw and another it is throws. So throws keyword, if a method is capable of causing an exception that it does not handle, it must specify this behavior so that the caller of the method can guard themselves against the exception by using throws keyword. So throws keyword can be used while defining a method, and if that method or the statements inside the method causes some exceptions which the method itself is not handling, then the method should declare the exception by using keyword throws. Throws simply specifies, or it gives a warning to the user of a message. So it gives a warning to the user of a message that this message may generate this particular type of exception. If you want to use this method, the caller who wants to use this method should handle the exception specified with the throws keyword. If you consider a general example, like if you're having a bike and if your friend is asking for a bike, and what you can do is you can give him your bike, but you can give him a warning that there is less petrol available in the tank. If you want to use the bike, you have to fill the petrol. So you are giving him a warning that the petrol, you have to fill the petrol, and it is up to the user of a bike now, or your friend now, if he wants to fill a petrol or not. So if he do not fill a petrol, that may cause a problem to him. So in the same manner, when you define a method, you can specify some warnings with the method. So this method may generate these type of exceptions, and the one who wants to use this method or one who wants to call the method needs to guard himself against this exception. If any of this exception occurs, again that may leads to program termination. So by using throws keyword, we can do that. So syntax of a throws keyword, it is given here. You can see the written type of a method. Throws keyword, it is usually used with a method definition. So written type of a method, name of the method, the parameter list the method takes, and the keyword throws and exception list. We can define any number of exceptions here. Throws arithmetic exception, comma number format exception, comma array index out of bounds exception. Any number of exceptions can be defined there, and all these exceptions needs to be handled by the one who uses this method, and the method also contains the body, and this body of a method may generate these type of exceptions which have been defined with the throws keyword. Okay, so this is about the throws keyword. Next, user defined exceptions. Now user defined exceptions, most of the exceptions which we have studied till now, that is arithmetic exception, number format exception, array index out of bound exceptions, all these are predefined exception classes. Mean these are defined by the Java team. These are not defined by the programmer itself. So we can, if we want, we can define our own exceptions as well. In Java we can have our own exceptions, because not always the predefined exceptions are enough to trap all the types of errors. To trap some of the errors, we can define our own exceptions in Java. Built-in exceptions may not always enough to trap all the errors. Hence, there is a need for user-defined exceptions, and this class should be a subclass of exception class. So whenever we create a user-defined exception, so this user-defined exception class should be a subclass of the class that is exception class. New exception type can be caught separately from other subclasses of throwable. So new exception class needs to be caught separately from other exception classes. Okay, let us see one example program on how to define a user defined function, user defined exception. Okay, look at this program. This program, it is used to create a user defined exception. So first we have a class myException, and this class myException, it is extending the class exception, means it is inheriting class exception. as we have discussed earlier, whenever we create a user defined exception, the class, the user defined class, exception class, should inherit the exception class. So this has to be a super class of all user defined exceptions. Okay, then inside this my exception class, we have a variable details, we have a constructor my exception, and this constructor is taking a variable as argument, and that value of the variable is assigned to detail. Okay, so outside the constructor it also contains a method called as toString method. Generally toString method is executed whenever we try to print an object of a class. If you pass an object of a class to a SOP statement, it will try to call a method called as toString. If that toString method is not defined, it will generate an error message. But if that message is defined in the class, it will automatically call the toString method and it executes the code. Now what we have defined in the toString method here? In toString method, we have only a single statement, return in double quotes, it is, means as it is it will print, that is my exception, plus that is used for concatenation, and what we are concatenating with detail. So whatever stored in a variable detail, that will come here, and again it is concatenated with closing square bracket. So that is what we are returning when the toString method is called. So this is our user defined exception class, and the class name is my exception. Okay, then we have one more class called as prg3, that is program3. In this program3 class we have a method that is compute, and this method also it is taking a one argument, and this method it is defined with the throws keyword, that is throws my exception, means this compute method it is giving a warning saying that if you're using this compute method, this method may throw an exception. What exception it may throw? It may throw my exception. Okay, whatever exception we have defined, that it may throw. Now what is included in compute? Inside compute we have a print statement that prints called compute, and it will print it with the value of a which it has been received, the compute is receiving. The next statement here, it is condition. If a is greater than 10, if a is greater than 10, we are throwing a user defined exception. So throw new my exception, we are creating an object of my exception class which we have defined earlier, and we are throwing it by using a keyword throw. Okay, and after the if condition we have one more statement in this, and that statement simply prints compute again, and that's it in the compute method. So that's it in the compute method. Outside the compute method we have one more method, that is our main method. Inside the main method, what we have done now? Inside the main method we have first created an object of prg3 class. Now when we have an object of prg3 class, using this object we can call a method that is compute, which has been defined in prg3 class. So prg3 class have a method compute, so we want to call that method. Now while calling the method compute, you can see we have called it here, obj.compute. But before calling the method, this method calls have been defined inside the try block. Why these method calls have been defined inside the try block? Because this compute method says, or it gives a warning that the code inside the compute method may throw my exception. So if you want to call the compute method, you have to handle my exception, and that is the reason we have defined a block try and catch. In the catch block you can see we are handling my exception, because this compute method gives a warning, and if we do not handle it, then it may terminate the program. So we are handling the my exception here. So when we call obj.compute and by passing value 1, as you know, from this particular point it will go to the definition of compute, that is here. And when we go to definition of compute, we are passing value 1 that will be stored in a. So a is equals to 1 for the first time. then it will print called compute and in bracket value of a, that is 1. Look at the output also. At the end we have here output. The first output you can see called compute and 1. So this statement will print called compute and the value of a. So initially value of a it is 1, so it will print called compute 1. And after that the next statement is if a is greater than 10. Looking at the value of a, is it greater than 10? The answer is no, because a is equals to 1. 1 is not greater than 10. So it will not execute the statement, that is throw, inside the if condition. Directly it goes to the next statement, that is it will print this statement which prints compute again. Now look at the output. You can see after printing called compute 1, it is printing compute again. Okay, and this is the end of a compute method. Once we are at the end of a compute method, again it is written back, again it goes back to the caller, that is our main method, and after that it will execute the next statement. So next statement is again obj compute, the method compute, but this time we are passing value 5. Again from this point it goes to compute, but this time the value of a is 5. Value of a is 5. So again it will print called compute 5. So you can see the output called compute 5, and even again checks the condition 5 is greater than 10. No, as it is no, simply go out of the if condition and execute system.out.println compute again. So our output compute again. Then it comes back and goes to the next statement. So next statement here it is obj.compute, and the value which we have passed it is 20 now. So this time again it goes back to the compute. Now the value of a it is 20. So value of a is 20. Then it prints called compute a, that is called compute 20. You can see here called compute 20, and then it checks the condition if a is greater than 10. Now value of a, as we know, it is 20. So 20 is greater than 10. Yes, it is greater than 10. When it is greater than 10, you can see we have a statement throw new my exception. So what it does, it creates an exception object of this class my exception by passing value of a. Value of a now it is 20. So it passes value of a to my exception. So from this point it goes to the constructor. Whenever we create an object, it goes to the constructor, as we know. The constructor is called automatically. So this constructor is called my exception, where the value is passed from here. The value 20 we are passing, so 20 is stored here in a, and the same value 20 we are storing in detail. So detail will have value, that is 20. Okay, so detail will have value 20, and after calling constructor again it returns back. So here we are creating an object of my exception, but we haven't used an object name. Directly we have said new my exception, which creates anonymous object. Anonymous in the sense the object which do not have a name. So such object we are creating, and that object is thrown by throws keyword. Means it creates something like this. It will create an object with some name, that is xyz, and this object, remember, this is an object of my exception class, and this is thrown by a throw keyword, and as it is thrown here, this object will be caught by a catch statement which is defined here, because compute itself is not handling the exception. Compute method do not have try and catch here. Then it goes to the caller of a compute. Who has called compute? Compute has been called from the main method, that is from this point. Okay, from this point the compute is called, where it has generated exception. So it will simply passes this object to the try block, where we have a catch statement. So catch statement catches that exception which is thrown, and it stores that object, that is xyz object, in E. Exception object now it is stored in E. So whatever exception object is created here, that is stored in E now, and when from inside the catch statement, when we try to print E, as I have told you, whenever we print the object of a class, automatically it calls toString method of that particular object. Now toString method of myException is defined here. You can see here, this is our toString method. So it will call toString method, and from the toString method, what we have done, return, we are returning something. What we are returning? myException plus details. I told you in details what we have stored, 20. So this will print myException in bracket 20, and that is the reason you can see we have the output caught. How it has printed caught? Because we have caught here in the catch statement first, caught plus e. So for first it will print caught, then it goes to toString. In the toString we are printing myException. So after caught, myException and 20 in square bracket. So this is how we are handling a user defined exception. So this program, it is to define, it is to demonstrate how a user defined exception can be created in Java and how it can be handled. Okay, that's it in today's session. We will stop here. Thank you.